Today I'm installing an AVITAL 3103LX alarm and keyless entry system. I'll do a quick overview of the parts, then show you the install of the door locks, the alarm, and all the wiring. Then we'll tidy everything up and test it out. This is the brain of the alarm system and also the primary shock sensor. It comes with two very good quality and compact fobs. Here we have the primary wiring harness, the valet button, the indicator LED, and some cables we aren't going to use. I'm not going to use the starter kill feature, and we won't be using the horn wiring because we're installing the DEI 514LN Siren. Finally, we won't use the lock wiring because the Autozam doesn't have a power lock system. Instead, we are adding the DEI 451M relay module and two DEI 524N lock actuators. We'll start with adding the power locks. In the 524N lock actuator box, you get a good length of wire and a rubber door jamb protector, as well as all the mounting hardware you should need. I decided to mount the actuator to the interior door handle bolts. You can mount it wherever you want as long as it can push and pull the locking mechanism. Once the actuator is mounted, cut and bend the spoke to fit your mounting location and tighten the coupler to the lock bar. I used blue Loctite on these. Test that the mechanism still moves freely. You can also apply voltage to the unit to make sure it locks and unlocks the mechanism. Drilling holes in the door and cabin was my least favorite part of this process, but it's probably the most reliable and clean way of routing the wiring. I measured where I thought the rubber boot would clear the door seal and strut and drilled with a stepped bit. I used a vacuum to suck a string through the door and then used it to pull the wiring through. Drilling into the cabin was a pain because there are a few layers of steel to go through, but again, using the vacuum to pull the string made it pretty easy. Once I put the rubber boot on, I tested to make sure it fit with the door closed. But at this point, there wouldn't have been much I could do if it didn't. I joined the wiring for the two doors into a single pair and ran it through the passenger side sill to the dash. I wrapped all the wire with cloth wiring harness tape, which I highly recommend. It's much nicer to work with than electrical tape, and it protects from abrasion. Now we'll quickly mount the siren. I'm mounting the siren to the back of the frunk area using steel M4 riv nuts. The trick with riv nuts is to drill the hole as close to the diameter of the riv nut as possible and then use red Loctite on the outside of it. I also use a dab of anti-seize on the bolt. The siren should be tucked away and facing down, or at least in a direction that it can't collect water. Now we'll go over some of the wiring, starting with the lock relays. The 451M module is basically just two 40-amp relays, one for lock and one for unlock. The pinout is printed on the unit and the instructions are pretty clear. 3 small wires go to the AVITAL brain. Blue and green provide the unlock and lock signals, and the center red is 12 volts. There are 5 heavier wires. White and brown are input for normally closed, they go to ground. Violet, which is the input for normally open, goes to 12 volts, and then the green and blue are your 12-volt lock and unlock outputs. Basically, the relay takes signals from the alarm brain and connects 12-volt power to the lock actuator in either the forward direction, green, or the backward direction, blue. To achieve this, we plug the violet wire to 12 volts with a fuse, and then the white and brown wires go to ground, as they are the normally closed circuit. Green goes to green on both doors, and blue goes to blue. When the lock button is pressed, the relay gets a signal from the AVITAL brain and connects full amperage 12 volts from the violet wire to the lock actuators, pushing the bar out. While I'm in here, I want to clean up the general wiring mess and get rid of the last 2 fuse taps from the previous owner. I like to remove unused wires from my connectors. You can use a dental pick to press out the connector pins. This tidies up your wiring and makes it much less confusing the next time someone looks at it. It's also easily reversible. I used the same method to add wires to the radio harness and turbo timer connectors to avoid directly splicing or tapping into the ignition or illumination wires. I also removed all of the inline fuses because I have auxiliary fuse blocks and I want all my fuses to be in the same place. Generally, the wiring for a system like this is pretty easy. Most of the AVITAL, Viper, HORNET, and similar DEI brands use the same wiring standards. So if you don't have a good install manual, you can usually find one similar to your application. Another good habit is labeling your work. You can buy a pack of these MR182 wire wrap labels for a few bucks and use a free template to print out whatever you need. When I bought this car, the wiring was an absolute disaster. Everything was done with red wire. There were half a dozen fuse taps and everything was spliced directly into the wiring harness. It's easy to do a good job on this stuff, so I try to make it better every time. Adding the valet button and LED is as easy as finding where you want to mount them and then routing the wires. I opted for the hood release bracket. The large empty hole here is for my underglow controller. Now all that's left is to clean everything up and test it out. It felt good to clean under the dash and to properly organize all the wiring. Hopefully I won't have to go back in here anytime soon. I also used some 3/4 by 3/8 weather strip to replace the worn out foam on the AC duct. This was a massive improvement to AC strength and would be worth removing the dash just to do this. If I were more motivated, I would have taken the AC and heater out and replaced all the foam, but my system works well and I didn't want to risk making it worse. I did lubricate all of the moving bits and it's noticeably smoother now. Before putting everything back together, I tested all of the normal electronics and then the lock and alarm features. It is possible to remove and reinstall the dashboard without removing the indicator stalks. Mine were super tight and I didn't want to risk damage with the puller, so I unscrewed them and carefully rotated the dash around them while they were loose. This whole process took me about 2 days and cost around $100 US. I did some side quests while I had the interior removed, and filming slowed me down, so if you're prepared, it's an easy one-day project. I chose DEI components because they make good quality stuff, but there's a lot of options out there. All of the model numbers are in the description below. This is my first YouTube video, so let me know what I'm doing right or wrong. I really have no idea. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I'm looking forward to the next one.